Native American reservations are being ignored, and even more than that, they're being destroyed, becoming mere slums. But no one talks about it. No one talks about the few tribes left that are struggling just to eat and put a roof over their head. The US government hides the atrocities they're committing on these so called reserved parcels of land. But they're not reservations, they're directly in the hands of the destructive side of the government and are being exploited to the bare bone. Native Americans have historically ensued so much plight and struggle, as we've all learned in our middle and high school classes. But then what? The curriculum ends, and we're all left wondering what happened to the Native Americans? Where are they now? Have they had any amounts of retribution for the horrors they had to face before? The government tries to stage their role as a selfless redo of the terrors of the past. They slap a tag of a couple tribe names over a few acres of land and pat themselves on the back. While in actuality, the government overharvests the land and leaves the people suffering without any economical resources and severely compromised natural resources to barely scrape by on. What are the Native Americans supposed to do? There are literally three social justice issues being broken right now: environmental, human rights, and cultural injustices. The environmental justice issue is the fact that the US is directly responsible for the destruction of land that belongs to Native Americans. I'm speaking of the 2016 to present day Dakota Access Pipeline, the one that goes straight through Lake Oahe, depleting a resource that the soy depend on. The Standing Rock Soy is a Native American tribe. They are peaceful and did not even arm themselves when in the midst of this injustice. Instead, they trusted the US law to come to their aid with policies like the National Historic Preservation Act and the National Environmental Policy Act. But they weren't protected. Jordan Bloom of S&P Global Platts explains how former President Barack Obama tried to cease its construction in 2016. But then former President Trump overrode that decision and restarted the pipeline's construction and finished it in late 2017. The U.S. District Judge Boasberg saw the federal easement of the lifting of that block was actually obtained legally with the Trump administration, so he was able to shut it down in 2020. But it didn't last long. The pipeline overcame that hold with President Trump's help, and the shutdown order was appealed. So the Dakota Access Pipeline, carrying 1 million barrels of oil a day, has been built and was done so without even considering the soy. There was no discussion with these Dakota residents. The lake is only half a mile from their homes. This is a classic example of an environmental justice issue. A minority group has been chosen to deal with the damaging and ugly parts of the federal oil industry. This is also a huge human rights issue. The US government didn't even care for the 4,000 protesters, including Black Lives Matter, Green Party leaders, and celebrities standing against its construction. The Department of Justice released a withholding permit, but somehow its construction continued. Can you imagine putting effort into every vehicle of voice available and still not having even one pipeline delay? In September 2016, Professor Alan Gilbert traveled to North Dakota and describes the events that played out in front of him. He reports, the Lakota people only participated in nonviolent civil disobedience. Tim Mentz, a tribal leader, testified to the federal U.S. District Court that the pipeline path was going through 27 graves and 82 stone sites. But their plea was ignored, and the very next day, in the presence of thousands of protesters with Native Lives Matter signs and indigenous music playing, the entire sacred burial grounds were desecrated. The protesters that got close to the digging tractors were faced with police brutality of released dogs, mace, and being thrown to the ground or arrested. On top of everything else, this is also a cultural injustice. It feels as if the Native Americans, who the US should be honoring, are now fighting the same battle over again. Their tribe's population and home are going to be severely affected. But we can refuse to let history repeat itself. No more abandoned ties, no more ignored cries. I want a united nation. We need to stop this federal greed. Enough slash than dash, enough blindsiding than silencing. The US government needs to take responsibility for the mess they've made. The Standing Rock soy community has had to endure this for 5 long years, but in the coming months, it may finally come to an end. Just recently, the Biden administration postponed the filed U.S. District Court case to April 9th. But change will only come if we're all there to stand up for the soy people together. Listen to 12-year-old Dakota Iournes of the Standing Rock community, who says, they're not the ones being affected, so why do they get to make the decisions? She's talking about the federal government. We need to also join the petition called Respect Our Water, started by the Soy Tribe. Their motto is, I can live without money, I can live without oil, but I can't live without water. We need to use our voices to take the pipeline down and fight to save this land. Speak for your nation, because why represent a country that destroys itself?